The way Shabbach started was actually, I was a 7-year-old little boy, and I had a dream one night, and the Lord showed me a picture of a great room that was filled with a bunch of people, thousands of people, encountering the Lord, praising and worshiping. It was like a really, really, really large church service, and I didn't know what I was looking at the time because I was 7 years old, but I knew that the Lord had planted something in my heart to do something that was going to be involved in ministry in some way. You fast forward that dream when I was 7 to about 19 or 20 when I was in college, and the Lord gave me the same dream again. And I knew that the picture that I remembered as a 7-year-old boy, I saw again, and the people that were in the room were the exact same age as what they were when I was a 7-year-old. And so the Lord said, I'm calling you to a generation. And 19, 20 years of age, I thought that was youth pastor, youth ministry, and it was. But I saw thousands upon thousands of kids gathered together worshiping. And I was connected to this ministry called Praise Fest with Chris Starr and several of his friends that had put a group of youth pastors together to have a fest in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And I knew what the Lord had given me by way of dream. And so I went to Chris one day and I started talking to him and said, hey, let me serve. I'd love to serve, understand what this world is. I feel like God's called me to do something very similar to this. It wasn't exactly what the dream was that I saw, that the Lord gave me at 7 and then at 19 or 20 years of age. But I knew I needed to understand kind of the inner workings of it. And I began to serve underneath Chris Starr and that ministry every single year, and begin to learn the ins and outs of it. And Chris, as he moved into a pastorate, felt like he needed to transition away from what was known as Praise Fest at that time. And he looked at me sitting in the middle of the meeting and said, I feel like I'm supposed to shut Praise Fest down, but I believe God's calling you to take it to the next place. And it was from that Em and I went into a prayer and fasting and seeking the face of the Lord, asking God, what is it that you would have us do? And the Lord said, what I showed you as a little boy, this is what I'm calling you to do. And that first year we opened up Shabbach, 2,000 people showed up. The next year, over 3,000 people showed up. And it was in that second year with over 3,000 people in that room in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, that it was exactly the picture that the Lord had given me as a 7-year-old little boy in a dream that he confirmed at the age of 19 and 20 in Bible college. So that's kind of how Shabbach started. Oh, it was huge challenges. It's huge challenges because I had this great big dream of thousands of people coming, and we began to sign great big contracts of tens of thousands of dollars. But I didn't have any money. All I had was a mailing list and a deposit down on the Myrtle Beach Convention Center for $1,500, yet I'm signing contracts for $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 at a time. But the Lord said, do this. And Em and I went through this big, long process of, we believe this is what the Lord has called us to do. This is what God has desired of us. We're gonna give it a shot. So I'm signing contracts, and I have no money, and I have no savings account because I'm a broke youth pastor at the same time. But it was probably the greatest faith step. But then you started seeing youth group after youth group after youth group beginning to sign up and to be a part. And then watching the manifestation of the glory of God made it a confirmation that this is what He had called us to do. Yeah, so the core mission of Shabbach was instilled in me actually about 5 years before we ever started Shabbach. I was at a particular youth event, and I was a youth pastor, and we had about 80 kids in our youth group at that time. And I had several of them that were involved in smoking weed and drinking and partying and all these other kinds of things. And I brought them to this one particular weekend retreat. And the presence of the Lord hit the place. I could tell you the name of the guy leading worship that particular day. And the glory of the Lord hit the place, and I watched these kids that were struggling with alcohol and drugs get up out of my youth group and go to the front. And the Spirit of God hit that room, and they were slain in the Spirit. They fall out, and God was delivering them, setting them free. And there towards the end of that encounter, they picked my kids up, and they took them into the hallway, and they left them in the hallway in the floor for God to minister to them so that they could have a concert with Third Day at the time, because they needed the system to go. And it was in that moment that I realized we're entertaining a generation. This is at least how I felt in that moment. We're entertaining a generation. We're not entertaining His presence in front of a generation. And it was in that moment where the seed of Shabbach was planted in me that God was calling me to create a space for this generation through praise, through prophetic preaching, through the power of the Spirit of God, to have an encounter with Him and know that they have been in the presence of the Lord. So the overarching principle for me is very simple. We want the presence of the Lord to come in such a way that kids, teenagers, their parents, no one can deny they have been in the presence of God. Yeah, the evolution of Shabbach has changed in a bunch of ways. We've grown in our organization, our ability, what really matters versus what's just fluff. What do kids need to be inspired and excited that takes them on the journey of understanding that it's really about encounter. The principles, of how we reach kids has probably evolved. We try to stay true with the times. Merch and logos and branding and all of that stuff has evolved, but our core value has never changed, which is how do we get these kids, no matter how distracted or dysfunctional or godless they may come from, how do we get them into a room and let them encounter the presence of the Lord that can wash everything away if they'll yield to Him? The lights have changed, the music has changed, all of these things have changed, but that encounter with God is the most important thing. Milestones, I remember one year Eddie came to town and his vehicle broke down, and the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, we're to raise up an offering, and we raised up thousands of dollars for him to be able to buy a bus. Missions and ministry things that we've done for Israel, and watching youth groups that we were able to just bless, orphanages that would come in and bring their kids in for free and be able to experience the presence of God. There's been some incredible things. Watching kids that didn't even know there was a God be filled with the Holy Spirit. I could just give you list upon list after 20 plus years of things that God has done, but what I love is it's always the same, which is the presence of the Lord is going to be in that room. Yeah, so probably the greatest impact we can have is that the impact does not remain Friday through Sunday. As long as a youth group is on fire and have a passion to pray and experience the presence of the Lord, and it's weeks and months and years later, one of my favorite things is to watch kids that used to be coming as conference attendees. They're now youth pastors, and some of them are even senior pastors now, and they're bringing their kids and their kids' kids to have the same kind of encounter. But at its core, I don't think they're coming to Shabbach. I don't think they're coming to get hit in the head with a microphone. I don't think they're coming to just see Eddie James or any of those things. I think that they're coming to have an encounter with the Lord, and it creates such an impression into their life that it may take months and even years for some of them for it to manifest in significant ways. But I love the fact that sooner or later it shows up, and I'm so grateful for those opportunities to let that happen. Oh, get ready. Oh, get ready. It's about to be buck wild. And buck wild not because of lights and sound and great music, but because the presence of the Lord is going to be there. And even to the biggest skeptic, get ready. Because you're going to have to pretend you didn't see God move. But I promise you, God's going to move, and it's going to be awesome.